Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger.
Hi.
At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. You heard it here first. This is the last episode of...
Are we recording? Is it recording?
Season 2. Yeah.
It is? Oh,
We're
I did.
live.
Oh, you already did. Sorry. I didn't even see that. I'm sorry. I just screwed up your flow.
No. Don't be sorry. It's okay. Hey, this is how startups sometimes go, okay? You know, things happen. You got to adapt. We're adapting. We're going to keep rolling.
All the time.
So yeah, last episode of season 2, episode 12. Pretty incredible season with some incredible guests, early engineers at current startups, early engineers at now unicorns and publicly traded startups, early engineers at great startups that now are founders of AI startups, investors in current, flock of startups and great technologies being built right now. So just some really great guests and really great perspectives that we've had on the show.
Yeah.
And now what we thought would be a good thing to put out is a framework.
Yeah.
A framework for founders. We work with so many founders that are, have all the ambition in the world, that can imagine that, product that they're building, that can imagine the amazing team that it will take and that they will build to build this amazing product. But they're there kind of by themselves, maybe with their co-founder, maybe with kind of, sometimes not even with desks. They're just kind of there.
Yeah.
Right?
Legit, no desks.
Right? And so they need to build their team. They need to build their team with the top engineers. And so what, steps should these founders be taking to build their team? So that's what this episode is about. It's a hiring playbook for founders. If you're a founder building a startup today, this is the playbook for you. So we're going to talk through the steps. We have 7 of them. So we have 7 steps that you, founder, can follow to build the team that you need. And we're going to share the steps, and we're also going to share some stories. We're going to share some things that we've seen founders not do well and be a mistake. And then we're going to share some things that we've seen founders do really well that prove productive. So we hope you enjoy. Let's dive right in.
Woohoo.
Step number 1 is you need your story, period. Your story needs to be on point. Ultimately, the person who you hire is going to join you because they want to be a part of the story. They want to be a part of your story, right? And, the story will come in the form of what is it that you're building? Why is it that you're building it? How does this person who you are wanting to bring on board, fitting in to your story? And ultimately, the more compelling the story, the more relevant the story, the more aligned the story could be with what's, exciting and interesting and compelling to the person, the more likely it will be that the person will join. And ultimately, the person will join because they want to be a part of the story.
Yeah.
The person won't join if they don't want to be a part of the story. If we could kind of boil recruiting down to its simplest, like that's about as simple as you're gonna get.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think we've seen this come up a lot where, well, I this could be like a separate podcast topic, but like, what are some of like the common questions that we field from candidates as we're talking to them about your company, and build like an FAQ on that?
Yeah.
But I think like first and foremost, what we're doing as recruiters is we're kind of sharing that vision with a candidate, is talking about where did the concept for this company come up? Why are they hiring? And how are you going to contribute to that vision? And that's like the kind of the framework for the story. But it's so important to kind of maybe just sit down for like an hour or 2 and write it out. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I hiring for this role? Why is this important to what we're doing? And how can this prospective person be a part of that? And just having that framework and that vision in your head before you start anything.
Yeah. I think that's the right approach. I think writing it down and kind of working it through is a nice exercise, because I think one, getting the story straight is important. Being able to, convey your own story around, hey, what was it that compelled me? Or what was the problem in the world that I was really kind of motivated to address? And then step two, making sure that's super relevant and attractive to the people who you're trying to bring on board. Like, I'll share an example. Like Stripe. Stripe is a good example. We continuously bring it up because we think they did an incredible job of building an incredible team. And the problem that they were trying to solve was online payments. And so before Stripe, if someone asked top engineers if they're interested in going to solve online payments, most of them would have said not really.
Yeah.
It wasn't a space that top people were necessarily excited about, but Stripe founders are engineers themselves. So they were able to convey the technical challenges specifically in a compelling enough way that was attractive to other top engineers.
Yeah.
That was the magic of the story that Stripe was able to convey. Another less technical or less savvy or less compelling founder could have tried to build the same exact thing and they would have failed because they would have said, oh, we're just trying to solve some problems in the payment space, pretty straightforward. And they wouldn't have been able to convey it in a way that was attractive to top engineers.
Yeah, I think it's important to convey why you care about it, because if you're able to do that, the right person is going to also care about it too.
Yeah.
The wrong people won't, and that's fine. Like let them go be who they are. But if you can successfully understand why you care about what you're doing and then share that excitement with the other people and attract the right people who are also excited by that, then that's a win. And it's not even just for recruitment purposes, but you got to be able to talk about that stuff as a founder, just in general, like whether you're talking to a VC and trying to get more funding or whatever it is, like you're going to have to tell that story, many times over to different audiences anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And story includes the story of yourself as the founder, the story of the company and the product, the story of the team, the story of the role. So it's one kind of story that weaves in all those important attributes that will ultimately, convey and compel a great candidate to be attracted to you and then eventually join.
The origin story.
The origin story is such a good one.
Yeah.
I've heard that reference. I've heard that brought up by a lot of founders really liking that concept, Alexis.
Why, thank you. Yeah. It's my own nerd out session on superheroes. But yeah, it's true. I think it's true. It's a good way to frame it.
Okay. So now that the founder has a story, what should they then do?
Okay. So this is like the step two. And we've seen this a couple of times play out, but I think step two is looking for top talent in your network first before you venture outward, right? So like if you're early stage founder, I think it could be a struggle to sort of like tap into your network if maybe you don't have much of one. But and we can kind of, I would probably go back to what we learned in our interview with Steve Bartel about talking about the power just in second degree connections. But I do think that there is some value in starting with your network first before going out, because you'll have the benefit of reaching out to people that maybe you've worked with before, or you know somebody that has worked with them and can attest to their skills and their what they can bring to the table. But there's also like some trust there. We've heard this theme, I think, in several times over with some of these interviews, that people really gravitate towards working with other people that want to come together on like a common mission and build something together because they like being together. Like there is something to that. And so I think like getting into that network first and building as many people as you can around you that you know and have context with, or that you have like some second degree of connection with, is great, because then you can go out there and use those other degrees of connections to continue building up your engineering teams. But I think it just makes sense to see who you can get first within your network before like venturing outward.
Plus one on that, and I think that most founders underestimate the size and extent of their network.
Yeah.
I think most people conjure up the idea of like, my network are the people who I have a direct connection with or who I know. And maybe that's limited. Maybe that's, grows a little bit over the time of a person's career. But a network can include really anybody that a person, has a connection with. Like I'll give kind of one just bar example. If continue to bring up the Stripe example, but Stripe founders went to MIT, and from their perspective, anyone else that went to MIT, whether their class or, a little bit earlier, a little bit later, could be considered a part of their network, right? I mean, they're a part of the MIT network. So that already increases the size of their perceived network from like, oh, here's like 20 people I know to here are like the hundreds to like maybe even the thousands of people who I know just from that one an MIT component, and then kind of expand out to other different communities. Maybe a founder is part of an open source community, or that network can be massive, or maybe they're part of some different companies that they've worked for, or maybe even through their friends who they know are part of networks that they want to be connected with. That's a network. And so there's a wonderful exercise to be done with founders to go from, hey, here's the start of my network, to a network expansion exercise to really kind of give them the extent of network that they actually do have connection to.
I'm just going to say it shamelessly, but huge plug for First 10. We could help with that. And recruiters are really naturally good at this because like doing referral drives is part of something that, especially internal recruiters, we know how to do that. We know how to orchestrate those. We know how to like tap into people's networks and help you look at your network a different way. So if you're kind of like, I don't know where to start with that, First 10 can help. We'll help you.
Yeah. We can help a founder cultivate their network. We have our network.
Yeah.
And so I think, founders greatly underestimate this part of their resource set. And then, extending out, from there, right? So step one is make sure you have a tight story that's compelling. Step two is leverage your network. I'll also just kind of plug on the network piece. From a candidate's perspective, most startups seem the same.
Yeah.
They kind of are just bucketed into like, and I'm also talking to a bunch of startups. That's literally kind of what they say. So you who is building a very special, highly personable startup founder is bucketed into like, and a bunch of startups. That's literally how candidates think about it. Until they have like some connection with a person, then it becomes a little bit more kind of individualized and personalized.
Yeah.
And so they look for that kind of trust-based connection, right? That's why like First 10, we invest in the building of our network so that when we're able to connect a great engineer with a great startup, there's like some form of trust that exists there.
Yeah.
That same sense of trust obviously exists between a candidate and a founder who share a common network.
Yeah.
So just kind of put that out there.
Yeah.
But step 3, right? Founders must be willing to do their own recruiting and outreach.
Yeah.
The best founders are busy recruiting. They're busy spending hours a day hitting up and meeting with and trying to close great talent.
Yeah.
I spoke with a founder who said that they want to spend the least amount of time possible on recruiting. That was the quickest initial call that I've ever done with a startup, because that's like with all due respect, I hope they do great.
Yeah.
But you want to stay far away from a recruiting perspective, because recruiting requires engagement. We want to work with founders who want to spend the most amount of time on recruiting, because that's what we believe it takes, whether they work with us or not. Like they should just kind of be really into the building of their team.
Yeah, 1000%.
So they have to do their own outreach, right? So that literally means like you have to be willing to like craft messages and like do outreach and like hear no a lot. Like our response rate is like 5%. So like 95% failure rate. So it is kind of just what that takes.
Yeah.
Maybe a founder will get a little higher response rate. Maybe they'll get, 10, 20% response rate. So that's still 80 no's for 20 yeses, right?
Yeah.
That's the game.
Got to have a thick skin for that too. 95%. When you put it like that, it makes me want to cry a little bit. But I think I'm just
right. And
I'm a little desensitized to it now after like 10 plus years of doing this. But yeah, sometimes when you put it that way, it's like, oh, that's sad.
Well, I mean, I think there are 2 reasons to cry. One is that it's really sad to get rejected that often.
Yeah.
And then 2, like, how psychotic does one have to be to keep coming back to that?
and actually, I really like my job too. That's the crazy part.
Yeah, I think both are great reasons to cry. So it's okay. So if a founder feels like they need to cry because they're doing so much outreach and getting so little response, that's better than the founder that says, I want to spend the least amount of my time recruiting. I'm too busy. I need to outsource this. Like that doesn't work. That doesn't work
either. And also we're happy to commiserate with anybody that wants to talk about their 95% failure rate.
Yeah, because you're going to get a 95% failure rate and then you're going to be really, really frustrated. You're going to bang your head against the wall. And that's where the breakthrough is going to come through.
Yeah.
Right? That's where the magic lives. Because then you're going to figure out what it will take to go from a 95% failure rate to a 90% failure rate, right? You're going to get 5 more positive responses, and one of those responses could be your hire.
Yeah.
That's going to make the difference in building a product that's going to help you achieve your vision. That's kind of how that is how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why are we recording this podcast? We should be failing right now.
We should. I know. I feel like I got to go back out there and go bang my head against the wall. We're wasting time.
Right?
Just kidding. No, I'm kidding. You ready for step 4?
I can't wait for step 4.
So step 4 is knowing what your red flags and deal breakers are. Basically, how do you filter candidates really quick and fast? Because I think this will also go into like saving yourself time. Because in reality is like, yes, we want founders to be really engaged in the hiring process, but we also know that you have other responsibilities and things to do. So it's like, yes, recruit, but how do you do it more efficiently? So I think dialing down on what those red flags and deal breakers are like quick will help you just get there faster. But so like some things to like kind of keep in mind is like you can hire for ability to execute instead of just pedigree. We see this a lot where like certain founders are very drawn to the way a person's resume looks. And I don't know that if we always see like a correlation to the best outcomes with pedigree, but we do see a lot of like, I don't know. I feel like some of the best hires I've ever made where I can see that person stuck around at the company a long time probably didn't look obvious on paper. I don't know if you see that a lot, Boris, but I feel like I do. And it's usually like diamonds in the rough, people that didn't have like formal CS degrees. We saw that actually even with some of the guests that we interviewed had like kind of untraditional backgrounds and ended up being amazing fits for like an early stage environment. But yeah, I mean, I think understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish and know that like what the signals are to identify that. So like if you're looking for somebody that can execute, maybe it's not pedigree that you're looking for. Maybe it's something else and you need to look beyond the resume. I wouldn't over index on technical skills too, because there's a lot of raw talent out there that are just like happy and hungry to learn and can adapt. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I'm a +1 on that. A couple things jumped to mind. So we did have a couple of great guests on the season. So Josh Inkenbrat and then Yash, both early engineers at Pinterest. If you look at their backgrounds aren't what would jump out as what a founder might describe as this kind of like exceptional prototype person that they're trying to build their team with. They brought, however, incredible value to Pinterest and at the right time that Pinterest needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of look at other startups that have gone on to achieve great success, you go back to look at their early team, it's not littered with this like incredible pedigree and these kind of like, these kind of wonderful attributes that people kind of envision when talking about what they want their team to be made up of. Sometimes those people that are imagined don't get attracted to the startups until a little bit later when they've already kind of become a name or when they've already, kind of de-risked, so to say. I heard one founder say that a startup isn't going to attract its kind of quote unquote like super pedigreed, kind of like beautiful looking backgrounds until a little bit later in their cycle once they've de-risked a little bit. And that's a really valuable perspective for founders that are building now. Sometimes you just kind of need the people that are super passionate about your product, that are kind of willing to be in the trenches with you, that can help kind of advance the product from its current state. That's sometimes what it takes at the early stage. We've been talking lately at firsthand. You kind of need a little bit of that dog in you, right? And so like from the startup perspective, right? It's like, are you passionate? Can you help build what needs to be built? That's sometimes what it takes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think all too often you get caught up in like the signal from the resume when it's really a mindset that you're looking for. It's not necessarily experience or skills. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
And I just think that we might even, I don't know, like I think if founders were more open-minded about those things and like looking for a mindset versus like certain things to jump out on a resume, like it would help them get to that who's the right person faster. That's just something that I've kind of been seeing. But I also think too that another thing that kind of could accelerate this and understanding where the red flags are is like also understanding your own interview process and like, am I vetting for the right things or am I vetting for something that actually doesn't tie into what I'm looking for at all, which we see that happen quite a bit. So like keeping in mind that like if you're rejecting candidate after candidate and they seem to be the right fit, initially, but they somehow aren't, stop and think about why that is. Because you might be like, overlooking some red flags or deal breakers early on. And maybe you just got to pay attention to it, see what the patterns are.
2 interesting examples regarding knowing your red flags. So we work with one founder who is building an AI product, and he specifically wanted people who were passionate about AI and the product that he was building. Now we worked with them a little bit over about a year and a half ago. So AI was, already out for like a good year and a half at that point, but it was earlier than today. And from our perspective, we're like, oh, well, can't you help get people excited about what you're building? Because we're used to working with founders that need to sell and candidates that need to be sold. And he was really firm on it. He's like, no, in order for this to work, we need people to be already passionate about what we're building and already passionate about AI. If they're not there yet, we're not going to help kind of turn them on to that. Now, that's a little bit of a controversial perspective, but he was right for the startup that he's building. That was his red flag and that was his deal breaker. And he just needed a team made up of people that were already passionate about what they're building. I thought while it was difficult for us to work with from the perspective of filtering talent, it actually provided great clarity. And I love the conviction in that. That was kind of one example. Another example is some of the FANGs have gotten bad raps around like extent of, passion, extent of like how hard people work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of memes around engineers at Meta and Google only working, a few hours a day and then, potentially even working multiple jobs with no disrespect to the many great people that work there.
Yeah.
But there are founders that just straight filter. They're like, we don't want someone that's coming straight out of, Meta or Google unless they have previously shown having some previous startup experience. So that's like very clear, deliberate deal breaker. Some other people have said like they'll put up an in-office requirement. That's like a really clear physical deal breaker, right? Working with a startup that now needs people in the office 5 days a week. No matter how good you are, if you're not willing to be in the office 5 days a week, deal breaker. And so whatever it is, just being really clear about it so you could, filter talent and then know who's right for you when they do show up would be what this step recommends.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add to that is like if you have a lot of deal breakers, like it's going to take you a little bit longer to find that right person.
Yeah.
But if you're okay with that, just be down with like slower hiring cycles, but like stay true to who you are. That's fine. And you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, kind of connecting step 4 with step 1. Like the extent of deal breakers, i.e. your bar, the extent of your bar kind of needs to match the quality of your story.
Yeah.
Like if your story sucks, but your deal breakers are high, you're going to be doing a lot of evening crying, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if your story is great, but your bar is low, you're going to get kind of flooded and you're going to build a mediocre team, right? So you kind of need it to be, balanced out.
Yeah.
You just need it to match. You need it to match.
Absolutely.
It should be like a whole nother step.
Whole other step right there. Is your bar based in reality? And how's your story?
Well, that's what we look for. I mean, when we talk to founders, our vetting process for the startups that we work with is, we first ask every founder, tell us your story. So we get a sense of one, what are they working on? How compelling is it? How compelling are they in communicating it? And then we map that to who they're looking for. So if they have like a mediocre story and they have a really high bar, either we didn't get something or they're going to have a hard time in the market. Now, we don't shy away from hard. Story's great and they have a high bar. That's really where we want to be spending our time.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, moving on. Step 5, interview for more than technical ability. I think it's going to be pretty obvious, but for founders that need to hear it, right? When you bring someone on board, part of what you're hiring them for is their technical ability, right? They're going to help build the product and help fulfill on the function that you're hiring them for. But you're also hiring someone that's going to physically sit next to you for like 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week for some extent of time. And so you're going to need to be able to enjoy your time working with this person. You're going to need to be able to collaborate with this person. You're going to need to be able to, Ilya, in Ilya's episode, he brought up a really good filter point. He's like, you're going to need to be able to argue with this person.
Yeah.
It's actually something that startups, I think, do a really poor job. And he calls this, listen to his episode, founders and startups do a very poor job of infusing a sense of conflict and tension into the interview process. And candidates are way too averse from that, given just the reality of interpersonal dynamics. And hey, conflict and disagreeing and being able to disagree in a healthy way is very much just a part of a work experience. And so finding a way to simulate that or finding a way to explore what that will be like is an important part of an interview process. Now, there are a lot of kind of like, common ways to evaluate for this. People talk about like the Sunday test. Would I want to spend my Sunday with this person? Or would I, want to, go take an airplane ride with this person? Or would I want to have a beer or a smoothie for the, non-drinkers with this person?
Yeah.
Some founders like to do work trials, right? Where they'll, bring a person in for a day or two, a week, whatever, some period of time to really kind of feel what it's like to work with that person. So Sophie in her episode, we talked about how coding is only 40% of the total kind of experience needed to write code.
Yeah.
The technical interview will evaluate for the 40%, but how do you evaluate for that kind of remaining 60? So
yeah,
some really interesting kind of dynamics to keep in mind as you're building your team.
Yeah, I forgot about that point that Ilya made, but it was really, I remember really liking that one. And I do think it's true, like everybody puts on their best face during the interview, and then the honeymoon period's over once you start that job, and you should know that you can have conflict with that person in a healthy way. Like, I think it's I don't know how you like arrange that in an interview. Now I'm starting to like formulate an interview focus area that's just called Fight Club. And then you figure out, if you can fight with that person in a fair way. I don't know. But I think it's really important. You have to know the good, bad, and the ugly of working with somebody and whether or not it's going to work.
Yeah. I think it's a really tricky kind of needle to thread. I think what most, in order for that conflict resolution one, for example, what a founder would do is ask about tension that a person has had in a previous experience, time when they disagreed with a leader or with a counterpart, and kind of like work through that. That would fall into like company would call a behavioral interview. Or they might have the person work through a technical exercise, and then they'll kind of purposely pick at or share counter perspectives to get a sense for how the person either would defend or work through the scenario. It's funny. I was I'm thinking back to a candidate that we interviewed at a previous company, and it was a pretty senior person, and we wanted to kind of get a sense for how they would deal with conflict resolution, and we kind of just made up something to dispute with them.
Yeah.
Because they were like all about their approach. And then we're like, oh, well, what if we pursued a different approach?
Yeah.
They actually got so upset about that turned out to be a reason why they didn't move forward with the job.
Yeah. But I
didn't have the heart to tell them. We were just making it up and simulating it.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to kind of go through that pain, and that's a good kind of sense for what it would have been like to interact with that person. And so I think we dodged a great bullet there.
Yeah. Okay. That was number 5. Are we on 6 now?
6 goes after 5. Yeah. That was awesome. We're not skipping steps.
Nope. Here at first 10, we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yes, we can.
All right. Step 6, sell your candidates on your vision. But I think this kind of ties back into like the first point we were making with understanding your startup story first. But I think it kind of like goes one layer deeper, is that you're going to have to win top talent sometimes without big salaries. So how do you do that? And I think conveying like your origin story in a way that makes sense will help you attract the right type of candidate. But how do you like put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is prospectively considering joining your company to work for you? You want to be able to build trust and share with them the vision that you have, but then also kind of think through like, how do I make this an attractive place to work for somebody? I think like you can win that talent war by just really showing that you understand what you're trying to do and that there's a clear impact to be made and that you want this person to be part of it. And those things sometimes are more important, I think, than even just talking about a huge salary range. So like getting creative about how you sort of like make an environment that engineers want to work in, Yeah. Especially if you're a founder yourself that is an engineer, like what are some of the things or reasons that make a place compelling to do engineering there versus anywhere else?
I think that's right. Because at this point we're on step 6, right? So we're kind of further down funnel here, right? So we kind of, went with the process to share our steps. So like in the beginning, the story is what it's going to take to attract the person to come and talk to you, right?
Yeah.
And then they're going to meet the team and they're going to go through the process and they're going to have kind of, gone through their getting to know each other process. And the selling the candidate is at the pre-offer stage. It's when you kind of bring the whole thing together, where you want the candidate to be like, oh, this is not only a great story. This is not only a great founder, this is a great team. This is a great role. They kind of start to see what it can be like being a part of that. And so that's what selling requires. Sometimes selling requires going out of your way and doing creative things to help the candidate feel more special, right? We heard in Josh's, episode how Pinterest was very kind of family oriented, and Josh was just starting a new family, and Pinterest went out of their way to help Josh celebrate a weekend he was going to go experience with his family, and that kind of resonated from a values perspective, right? So often startups aren't going to be able to bring people in because they're going to pay more money or lavish them with these physical things, and so it has to be helping to compel them to be a part of the experience and the journey that you're on. And while recruiters could help with selling, ultimately a candidate will join because they want to be a part of what the founder is leading. And so the founder really has to be the best salesperson or kind of conveyor of all of this.
Yeah.
If they want to attract a great team, or the quality of the team they attract will be directly proportional to the quality of their ability to convey and sell their vision.
When I first started recruiting, I want to say it was Can that gave me some really solid advice. And he said, don't underestimate the emotional aspect of changing jobs and how that plays into like a candidate's decision. It's not just money based. Like where you work is where you spend the majority of your week. Like you probably spend more time with the people you work with than you do your own families in some cases. So it's not just about the money. It's also, do they feel personal connection to who they're going to be working with? And so, you have to sell the vision of your company, but also don't forget that they're going to be working with you. If there's no connection there, you're not providing like a space that feels like it would be fun to work in, it's going to be lost. Like that emotional piece, like don't underestimate it because it's very, very important. And also like if you do have people who are on your team, maybe you're not, maybe it's not like the first hire outside of yourself. I would say like make sure that everybody on your team knows how to like share their excitement for why they're working with and be a part of the interview process too.
Yeah.
Because you're selling your team and like, hey, come work with us. We're cool. Like that's really what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I want to continue bringing it back to founder because this is the founder's toolkit. I'm reminded of Steve Bartel's episode. Remember when he talked about he was ready to sign with Facebook.
Yeah.
That's where he entered and that's where he thought he'd have the most fun. And then he kind of stumbled upon this Dropbox thing, never heard of it, but a lot of good people were going there. And then Drew, the founder, called him out of the blue one night. And Steve's like, what are you doing calling me? And so that's what it takes, founders.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
Calling the candidate. Founders will text the candidate and say, I'm in your area, even if they're not, and say, let's go grab dinner. And then go drive there right now to go grab dinner with the person. They'll go there and they'll invest that energy and help convey what it is they're building. For a founder, it's like the vision and what you're building is obvious. There's a clear picture of it in their minds, but that's not the case for the candidate.
Yeah.
And so going well out of your way to compel that makes a massive difference. And founders, just to put it out there, of all the founders that we work with, I would say like a very small percentage do what it takes to bring in top talent.
Yeah.
Most of them follow kind of standard protocol. Those that go out of their way, call candidates late at night, go grab dinners with them, figure out creative ways to compel their family to like support the person they're trying to hire. That really does stand out. So you have those instincts, follow them. Don't be scared. It will make a big difference.
Yeah. And also, I'm just going to say this one thing too. Like this is, as a founder, if you're lucky enough that where your company actually does go the distance and you scale and you have thousands of employees or whatever, and you're living the dream, this is the only time in like your journey as a founder that you'll be able to even spend that much time with like the people that you're hiring. So like, why wouldn't you do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The more your company grows, you're going to be eventually like farther apart from that. You're not going to have time to actually do that. But you get to handpick. This is a part in your company where you get to handpick the people you're working with and go all in on it because it's going to ultimately dictate how successful you are later.
Yeah. I will say, though, that we never recruited for Meta. We recruited against Meta. And even when Meta was in its thousands, we would be recruiting candidates who would be talking about getting personal calls from Mark Zuckerberg while Meta was in its thousands.
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg was personally recruiting. And recruiting fresh PhDs, fresh college grads, interns. Like this guy's into recruiting, and it shows in the quality of the team that they built.
Absolutely. I mean, that's pretty baller. I that's really cool. It is true, and it's true though. It's very true.
Yeah.
But again, another empire that was built because the founder cared about recruiting.
Yeah. And go back to Sophie's episode, right? Remember how she talked about interns sleeping in the conference rooms, and that was like the problem they needed to solve for because they couldn't have like Friday morning meetings. Well, who does that unless it's for a founder that's like that into it and like goes so out of their way to convey the mission and why someone should be a part of it.
It was down to play chess with the interns too. That was cool. I liked
at 1 a.m.
At 1 a.m.
At 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Right?
Love it.
Okay. We recap the steps real quick.
Yeah.
So step 1, have a great story. Convey your story well.
Yep.
Step 2, look for talent in your network. Most founders underestimate the extent of their network. Step 3, you have to do outreach. You have to be willing to actually physically recruit. Step 4, know your red flags, know who you're looking for, know your deal breakers so you have really clear filters for who doesn't and does align. Step 5, interview outside of just technical capability. Technical capability is actually going to be a pretty small part of what ends up mattering for the team that you hire, especially even more so now with the advent of AI and how much one could get accomplished technically with AI. Step 6, the importance of selling and all the kind of creative ways that founders should be selling. Final step is step number 7, make an offer. So when you make an offer, that's when you're kind of putting it all together.
Yeah.
Forget about the paper version of an offer. You're literally, at that point, you're basically asking the candidate to marry you. That's kind of, it's your proposition.
Yeah.
It's your proposition, right? I've seen founders spend all this time with the candidate through the interview process, and then they email the offer and then kind of like sign it with like, let me know.
No.
Those don't get accepted.
Yeah.
Those don't get accepted, right? Because, those don't get accepted. When you convey an offer, you ideally want to be in person, right? You want to invite the person in, invite them to dinner, right?
Yeah.
This is a big deal. It's a big deal for you. If you're a founder and you're building an early team, you're hiring, employee number 3, 5, 7, 10, it's a big deal. You're growing your company by 10%, by 20%, whatever the number is. Go meet the person, spend a couple $100 on dinner, and then convey the sell and extend the offer right there. Talk about all the attributes of the offer. Talk about the role, talk about the title, talk about the base salary, talk about your philosophy of base salary. Back that base salary up with market perspective and why you've decided to extend that. Extend the equity component. There's a lot of confusion in the market around equity. Should it be a percent? Should it be a number of options? Should it be in present day value? Should it be in future value?
Yeah.
The answer to all those questions is yes. It should be actually all of those things at an early startup stage. And it should be communicated directly from you, the founder, in as much context and detail as you're able to convey, so that the person leaves with a great understanding of the full extent of what working at your startup will include. Give time for questions, give time for perspective, discuss, debate. You want to leave with a good understanding. Find out how that person is going to need to consider this with their family, with their community, whatever.
Yeah.
Go through all of that. And in-person time is a wonderful way to do it. It'll stand out from the many other startups, some of which are emailing offers, unfortunately.
Yeah. With just a whatever date, like here, send this, let me know within 2 weeks. Don't do that. Don't do that. So, yeah. I think too, like founders should have like an idea of what their compensation philosophy is going to be, because it will help them sort of figure out like how I want to structure these things and how I want to offer it. And, if you're somebody that's like, as a founder, it's really important to me that somebody has ownership and like skin in the game when they join my company. Like that's why our offers are going to be a little bit more heavy on equity. That's fine. Or some people want to retain a little bit more of that and offer more base, but like have your compensation philosophy kind of clearly outlined and have a conversation with that candidate early on about compensation. Like don't let it go to the end because you're going to get like some either like terrible surprises towards the end or not.
Yeah.
That's like just recruiting 101. Talk about it early. Just do it.
Yeah. And First 10, we've been around, we've seen hundreds of hires, probably nearing on like thousands of hires. Like so many hires come through our world between this and previous experiences that we've had. Recruiters are hugely underutilized in terms of their experience and knowledge of what it takes to extend and close an effective offer. Leverage your recruiter. There's a lot of value that a recruiter or someone in your people function can help with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So now that we look back, which of these steps do you think is the most important in the process? Like if a founder could only follow one, which one should they follow? Hopefully they're following all of them.
Yeah. I think it's the first step. I think like understanding your story, what it is that you're doing, who you're looking for, and why that person would presumably care about this is like, I think it's like a thing that you don't have to like spend a ton of time on, but it helps to have that picture in your head. Is if you are having to work with a recruiting agency or you're working with an in-house recruiter, whatever, you're going to have to tell that story to them so that they can tell it to candidates. So they're going to need to understand it and know it. Candidates will need to know. Have that story like down, understand it, so that way you can convey it multiple times and make it repeatable, because you're going to interview a lot of people. 95% failure rate, right?
That's a fact.
You better get used to telling that story.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm a story person too. I would have picked that one, but
yeah,
I think I'm going to go with step 3. I think all these steps are really important, and I really do think that one must follow all these steps in order to successfully build a great engineering team. But I'll go with step 3. I think the greatest story in the world and all the kind of wonderful, theory about who you're trying to build, if you're not willing to do the outreach, if you're not willing to kind of put in the work,
yeah,
you have a very difficult time with recruiting. I'm kind of reminded back of like Steve Bartel's episode, and he grinded. There was no kind of silver bullet. There was no magic to it. He really just put in a lot of effort to reach out to people in creative ways through his network, not through his network, to ultimately get the touches and then the opportunities to, build the team that, he ended up building first at Dropbox and then later now at Gem.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, let's bring it home.
All right.
This is the end of season 2. It's been so much fun doing these episodes. I really loved our set of guests. I loved everyone who we've had the opportunity to meet. One, I feel like these are just kind of cool stories that are, being kind of shared out in the world. And I love that there's a nice community that exists and that we're helping to kind of, foster around the building of early startups. I mean, every company that exists, no matter how kind of big or small, at some point was in its early days, right?
Yeah.
And, has some kind of a story around how, some first handful of people were brought in and the team was built and, what it turned into, mistakes made, et cetera. And it's just been so much fun.
Yeah.
It's just been so much fun.
We've learned a lot too. I think just talking to so many different people with their perspectives and their stories and hearing how they navigated things. It's great. I've had a lot of fun with this season.
+1. So we really hope you've enjoyed the season. We hope you've enjoyed and benefited from this Founders Hiring Toolkit. We'd love to see you use it and let us know what resonates with you, what you're doing that works, what you're not doing, but that you are starting to or will start to do. And hit us up. We have a lot of passion around all this and can certainly help either from a recruiting partnership perspective or from an advisory perspective or from even just kind of chatting it up about your experiences or feelings about what we've shared. But we hope you enjoy and have a great rest of the day.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.